Hi everyone, and welcome back to Urban Pulse GY, your planning podcast, where we highlight developmental initiatives in Guyana, navigate planning issues, and explore potential solutions. I am Chrisandria Limburg Finance, your host and planning coach. Good evening. Did you know that Columbus, in his many voyages, never docked or landed on this part of the world? He never did. In fact, on his third voyage, he passed by the South American mainlands. And it is said that he sighted South America, but he never landed on this part of the world. Did you know that? But for more of this and other interesting facts about Guyana and our urban planning landscape, stay tuned to today's Planning Digest segment, where we'll be learning more about this and other interesting facts.
For all your photography needs, contact Lightning Photography today. We provide stunning and professional photography for weddings, birthdays, engagements, and we also do professional headshots and passport photos. Our studio is conveniently located at Company Road, Buxton, on the east coast of Demawaro. So give us a call on 663-6067. That's 663-6067. Or find us on Facebook at Lightning Photography. Lightning Photography, vividly stunning.
In today's planning presentation, we will be looking at different types of human settlements. Human settlements can be broadly characterized based on various criteria, including population density, economic activities, geographical characteristics, all of those and others. Rural settlements, if we're to start there, usually consist of small communities with populations that are very small. When we talk about rural settlements, what comes to mind? How many people live there? What activities they're involved in? Rural settlements have low population density, ranging from a few dozen to several hundred individuals. Additionally, the livelihood of persons living in rural area is sustained mainly through agriculture, animal husbandry, fishing, forestry, etc. Now, there are several types of rural settlement, and the first I want to talk about is isolated dwelling. And as the name suggests, it speaks of isolation, like a single house or farm located very far from others. Then there are hamlets. These are small clusters of houses, maybe 4 or 5, and they have limited services there. There is also villages. These are larger than hamlets, and they often provide basic services like shops, and they might have a school, a health center, basic services. So we see the difference between hamlet, isolated dwelling, and villages. Now the question is, where do you live? If you live in a rural community like Annandale, Port Royal, Enmore, Buxton, Wim, Denamsel, then I want you to think for a minute, what factors do you think would have influenced persons locating there? Was it access to water sources? Was it because the land was fertile, hence it was suitable for agriculture, so people decided to settle in that area? Was it because there was available material for building? Or was it close to maybe a mining site? The thing is, all of these factors comes together to influence where people settle or where settlements are located. So another type of settlement is urban settlements. And when we talk about urban settlement, contrary to what's happening with rural settlement, this area is highly populated, meaning there are lots of people living in this type of settlement, and the numbers ranges from thousands to millions. And the area is often characterized by significant infrastructural development. So in many cases, they're like high-rise buildings, well-defined rails and transportation network and all of that. Also, there are many different types of economic activities going on in these areas. Urban areas, they serve as centers for commerce, industry, governance, culture. All of these are key aspects or key factors within urban areas. Now, there are several types of urban settlement. And the first I want to talk about is towns. When we talk about towns, we're talking about the smallest of the urban areas. The smallest. And they provide like basic services. You may find banks. You may find government agencies, etc. The other type of urban settlement is cities. These are larger than towns, and they are larger urban centers with extensive services and economic functions. Cities often serve as regional hubs. Then there is metropolis. These are larger urban areas that would have been formed by the merging of multiple cities or towns into a continuous urban landscape. So a very good example of this is the Greater London area. And then there is the megalopolis. And these are extensive regions that encompasses multiple metropolitan areas. In Guyana, we do not have metropolis or megalopolis because some of these surpasses the total number of our entire population here in Guyana. But we do have urban centers, and some of these are like, we know for sure we have Georgetown, which is the capital. There is Anna Regina, Bartica, Corriverton. We have Linden, Lethem, Mabaruma, Madia, New Amsterdam, Rosal. So we talked about towns, we talked about cities, metropolis, and megalopolis. There is also what is called suburban settlements, right? And these areas are really transitional zones that are located on the outskirts of urban centers. They typically features residential neighborhoods that benefits from the goods and services of the nearby urban area due to its close proximity. And this is done while maintaining a more spacious environment. In other words, residents or persons living in suburban areas, they enjoy more space as compared to persons in the urban center where it's more densely populated. So if you're to consider, let's say Georgetown, can you think of maybe two communities that can be considered as suburban settlements? To the east, we can think of Bel Air, the Bel Air Gardens, that area. And if we're to look on the East Bank, then we can think of community like Eccles or the Banks Park area. These communities often are designated for residential purposes, but they also consider commercial activities along with the residential services and so on that they provide. Additionally, suburban areas, they share characteristics of both urban and rural settlements. So if I'm to sum the presentation up, I'd say the primary settlements, they are rural settlements, they are urban settlements, and they are suburban settlements. The primary urban settlement in Guyana consists of one major city, and we know that's Georgetown. And we have several towns, and they serve as regional capitals. We have numerous villages. We mentioned some in our presentation, like villages like BV, Betafawakting, and villages like Victoria, Metamerzerg, and there are many, many others. All of these villages contribute to local culture and economy. And these communities, they all reflect the country's diverse population. So the communities would have different races, the different religion. People will be going to different institutions, working in different organizations, involved in different economic activities. All of these community adds to the diversity of our country. Visit M&R Printery for all your stationery needs. They specialize in printing, photocopying, laminating, scanning, and binding. They have in stock a variety of textbook and worksheets for all grades. So for all your school supplies, contact Melinda at 133 Grosvenor Street or on 615-6470 or 655-5652. Check out M&R Printery today. So initially we talked about the Amerindians, and we mentioned that they were the first people to settle in this part of the world. We also mentioned that they would have made significant contribution to Guyana and our geopolitical landscape. But for today's Planning Digest segment, I would like to introduce to you our European settlers. I'd like to talk about a point from which history has it that they would have landed on this part of the continent. Today's Planning Digest segment will aid in having us understand our geopolitical history, which will shed light on Venezuela and Suriname's absurd claims. So let's lay the groundwork. The Amerindians are here. And at this point in our history, we would have already established they had their settlements, the Arawaks would have settled down, the Caribs came, would have caused them to scatter across the Lesser Antilles. So the Caribs are here when we would have had our first encounter with our European counterparts. So at this point, everything is nice and tranquil. Our indigenous population, they are taking care of the land. You know, their settlements, they are functioning. While this was happening, two of the most powerful maritime nations in Europe, mainly Spain and Portugal, had begun expanding their territories through exploration and colonialization. Portugal focused their expansion efforts primarily along African coasts and into Asia. In 1419, the Portuguese discovered the Madeira, which included 4 islands situated in the North Atlantic Ocean, just off the northwestern coast of Africa. The Azores Islands, also in the North Atlantic Ocean, was discovered by Portugal between 1427 and 1431 respectively, around that area. Then there was the Cape Verde Islands, which was critical, in fact, which is critical to our territorial discourse, as we will discover as we go down later in this series. The Cape Verde Islands, it was discovered and settled by Portugal around 1460, thereabout. Additionally, the Portuguese explored the West African coast, and they would have established several trading ports in present-day Senegal and Gambia. They also established sea routes in India, which was critical for trade. So there we see Portugal. They were exploring and setting up seaports and all of that. And on the other hand, there was Spain. Spain's conquest of the New World, as they call it, but it's really that we're speaking of the Caribbean, right? So Spain's conquest and exploration came primarily through the voyages of Christopher Columbus. It started with Bahamas, and Bahamas was found with Columbus's maiden voyage in 1492. He went on to Hispaniola in that very year. Columbus explored Hispaniola, which is present-day Haiti, and the Dominican Republic, and he established a settlement there called La Navidad. He then forwarded his voyages, his exploration. He went on to Cuba that very year. He initially believed Cuba was part of Asia. In fact, he was looking for Asia. So when he got to Cuba, he thought he was, he landed on Asia. In 1494, Columbus discovered Jamaica during his second voyage. After Columbus's 1492 voyage, tension rose between Spain and Portugal over who should be allowed to explore this newly discovered Caribbean region. Understand what was happening. Remember, Portugal was all the way on the northern coast, northwestern coast of Africa, and they were discovering lands and all of that. And Spain was now on their venture. They were now on it. So they had now found Haiti, now found Jamaica. So there was concern that there was more to discover in this Caribbean region. And Spain was like, Portugal, you get enough going on already for you over on the African coast. We should be allowed to dominate or dictate what happened in this new area that is being found. So tension rose. So to diffuse the tension, in 1493, Pope Alexander VI issued a series of papal bulls, which really were formal authoritative decrees or charters that were issued by the Pope, who was in control of the Catholic Church. Traditionally, the bulla or lead seal was used to announce important events or decisions. So in this case, the bull Intracatra was made in response to Christopher Columbus's exploration of the North and South America. So the Pope decreed that land discovered by envoys of the Spanish kingdom, once they were not claimed by Christians, they would now belong to Spain. Portugal, by way of the very decree, was granted rights to land discovered east of an imaginary line of longitude running through the eastern part of present-day Brazil. They got rights to that, and everything west belonged to Spain. So this doctrine of discovery became the basis of all European claims to colonize the Americas. So I hope the pieces of this territorial puzzle is beginning to come together. I'll ask that you stay tuned to our future Planning Digest segments, because we'll be adding more facts that will enhance your understanding of Guyana's claim to its 83,000 square miles. There you go, my friends. Digest on that. So this wraps up today's podcast, where we would have talked about Portugal and Spain and their conquests, their exploration, and their bid to colonialize this part of our world. We talked about the role Pope Alexander played with his decree on who is allowed to explore where. Now join us again next week as we continue along this informative journey, as we learn more about our history and our territorial dispute. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube and Facebook, as together we build sustainable communities and a better Guyana. Bye, friends.